The house at the edge of the lake, she said it the way someone might ask you to move a chair. Calm, unhurried, her voice carrying no more weight than a casual observation about the weather. My parents will take the upstairs rooms. My sister and her children can have the downstairs. It makes the most sense. You have more than enough space. Her fork never stopped moving. She kept cutting into the pie I had risen early to bake, the one that had filled the kitchen with the smell of browned butter and warm fruit all morning. I looked at her for a moment. Then I lowered my fork to the plate and let it rest there. The small sound it made against the ceramic seemed to travel farther than it should have. I looked at her directly when I spoke. This is my home, I told her. Not a lodge, not a vacation rental for someone else's family. The room went still. Outside, through the screen door, the lake was flat and silver. I had lit candles for the dinner. I had ironed cloth napkins. I had made sure not to put strawberries anywhere near the dessert because I remembered that Sierra couldn't eat them. I hadn't expected to be thanked for any of it, but I hadn't expected this either. Evan kept his eyes on the table the whole time. His hands were folded in his lap. He didn't look up. Not once, not even when the silence stretched past comfort. Sierra tried again. Her smile adjusted slightly, the edges pulled a little tighter. It would only be a few weeks, she said pleasantly. They've never had the chance to stay somewhere like this. And honestly, you're not really using every room anyway. I chose not to speak, not because I had nothing to say, but because once I started, I knew I wouldn't find a clean place to stop. We finished dessert, or rather, they did. Then they moved to the porch for coffee and conversation about summer plans, laughing at things I couldn't hear clearly, their voices floating in through the screen like something I didn't want inside. When they drove away, I walked through each room of the house, slow and deliberate. I shut every window. I checked every lock twice. I turned off the lights in rooms I had once imagined would hold people I loved. I slept that night with the porch light burning, not out of fear exactly, more like something in me had gone on a quiet kind of alert. Something beneath the floorboards had shifted, and I felt it. 7 days later, I saw the moving truck. I spent 4 decades organizing other people's histories. A university library basement was my world. Dust on my cuffs, worn cotton gloves, boxes of manuscripts and letters and photographs filed with care. It was patient work, precise work. Nobody interrupted. Nobody needed me to explain myself. I was good at it, and I found satisfaction in it. When my husband died, Evan was still young enough that his grief needed tending before mine did. So I made schedules. I cooked proper meals, I kept the bills organized, and the school calendar on the refrigerator, and his sadness close enough to mine that neither of us had to carry it entirely alone. We managed, not by falling apart, but by steadying ourselves against each other quietly without theatrics. I never looked for another partner. It wasn't loneliness that kept me from it. It was practicality. My energy had somewhere to go. I took on extra hours, downsized our apartment, bought sensible used things, skipped trips I might have taken, and said yes to Evan whenever yes was possible. Every month, I moved a small amount into savings. In the beginning, it was almost nothing. Over years, it became something. I didn't want a cruise. I didn't want a resort. What I wanted, the thing I thought about on quiet evenings, when Evan was grown and gone, and the apartment felt like a waiting room, was a place that belonged only to me. Somewhere I could hear myself think without the noise of obligation pressing in from every direction. When Evan got his first apartment, I gave him the deposit money without being asked. When he and Sierra got engaged, and her mother declined to pay for the dress, I paid for it. I don't say these things as complaints, I say them as facts. They thanked me each time, politely, correctly, the way people thank a stranger who holds open a door. I never asked for anything in return. I didn't need a grandchild carrying my name or a birthday celebration or any kind of public tribute. I only wanted, eventually, the right to be left to myself in peace. I found the lake house listing one autumn and drove up to see it alone. I brought the cashier's check in my coat pocket, folded in half. When the door opened for the first time and I saw the way the morning light cut straight across the kitchen and landed on the sink, something loosened in my chest. I bought it that afternoon. For 1 full year, the house was exactly what I had imagined. The silence was generous. The lake changed colors all day. I stopped checking my messages before I'd even gotten out of bed. I read books again the way I used to, slowly, without guilt. Then came the dinner. Then came Sierra's smile. And 7 days after that, the truck. It was white, and it moved down my gravel driveway as though it had already been there 100 times before. I was at the kitchen sink when I saw it through the window, my hands still wet. I told myself it was a delivery, a wrong address. Then Sierra stepped out wearing sunglasses and carrying a clipboard against her chest. Not a travel bag, not a small overnight case. A clipboard. Her parents followed. Her sister followed. 2 children I had met once and barely recognized. Then came the plastic bins, dozens of them, unloaded from the back of the truck with organized efficiency. Sierra moved around the lawn, pointing and directing, her voice carrying the easy authority of someone who had already decided how the day would go. Her father said something and laughed. One of the children sprinted ahead of the group and hit both palms flat against my front door. They didn't knock. They walked toward the porch the way you walk toward something that already belongs to you. My feet moved before my thoughts did. I crossed the room and turned the deadbolt, then the second lock. My hands were steady, which surprised me. I stood behind the door and waited. The banging started within seconds. Then Sierra's voice, bright and brittle. "Corvina, we're here! We're here! Open up!" The handle rattled. A child started crying. Someone swore. Sierra dropped the pleasantness from her voice, the way you drop something you were only carrying for convenience. "Open the door," she said. "Don't make this into something." I walked to the small table where I kept the phone and dialed the sheriff's office. My own voice sounded far away, like I was listening to someone else give a clear, calm report. "There are people attempting to force entry into my property," I said. "I am alone inside." "Yes, I'm safe." I sat down in the chair near the window and folded my hands and waited. Outside, the truck engine idled. Feet moved across the gravel. The banging continued for a while and then slowed. When the patrol cars came, I heard the shift in the voices outside. Sharp, official tones. Sierra arguing, her father escalating, the children confused and loud, then car doors, engines, the driveway going quiet. After the last vehicle left, I walked to the door and locked it again, even though it was already locked. It took 2 days for the post to appear. A neighbor forwarded it to me with a short note. "I thought you should see this." Sierra had written that I had locked small children out of the house and called the police on my own family, that they had come in goodwill and been treated like criminals, that I was a bitter woman with a cold heart and too many rules. A photograph was included, one of the children sitting on a plastic bin at the edge of the lawn, face scrunched, eyes wet. The shot was cropped carefully. You couldn't see the truck. You couldn't see the bins being unloaded. You couldn't see her father's posture when the deputies told him to back away. The comments were predictable. People who had never met any of us offering their sympathy freely, but then I saw a name I recognized, Marlene, from the post office. A woman who double-knotted her scarf and handled envelopes like they were something worth protecting. She had written simply and without drama, "I was there. I saw what happened. They weren't guests. They arrived without notice, without permission, and they tried to open a door that wasn't theirs to open. That wasn't a family visit, that was a takeover." The comment hadn't gone viral. It didn't collect hundreds of reactions, but it stayed there, plain and accurate, underneath all the noise. I bookmarked the page, then closed the laptop and slid it across the table. That night, I didn't sleep in my bedroom. I went to the small back room that looked out over the lake, the one still full of boxes I hadn't unpacked. The closet smelled like old paint. The wallpaper near the window had started to peel at the corner. I reached past a battered suitcase and pulled out my toolbox. In the morning, I wrote a list on the back of an envelope and taped it to the refrigerator. I crossed off one line at a time. Paint, window frame, closet, linens, mattress, new, firm, delivered on a Tuesday when the road was quiet. 10 days of work done alone. Each day I woke to it, moved through it, and finished. Some days I didn't speak a single word until the light was already gone from the sky. That quiet felt like something being restored rather than lost. When the room was finished, it wasn't just presentable. It was claimed. A place that had been storing boxes was now a room with a purpose. I wrote a listing for it, short and plain. Quiet lakeside room, maximum 2 adults, no children, no pets, no gatherings, no extended stays. This is a place for rest. If rest is not what you are looking for, please do not inquire. The first guest was a ceramicist traveling down from Maine. She asked about the morning light and whether she could bring her own kettle. She stayed 2 nights, kept to herself entirely, and left behind a small blue teacup with a chip near the rim and a handwritten note on the back of a postcard. I set the cup on the windowsill. The second guest was a retired professor who arrived with his own slippers and spent most of his time reading on the porch. He took his trash out without being asked. On his final morning, he left a wrapped chocolate bar and a note that said simply, "Peace lives here." I stood in the hallway after he drove away and breathed, not waiting for anything, not listening for a knock, just standing in a house that had stopped holding its breath. I updated the listing that evening. One new line at the bottom. This home is not available for family stays. Evan came alone on a weekday afternoon. I saw his car at the end of the driveway first, parked like he wasn't sure he had the right to come closer. He sat inside it for several minutes. Then the door opened and he walked up the steps slowly. Just himself, no Sierra, no children, nothing in his hands. I opened the screen door and stepped back to let him in without speaking. We sat in the living room. He chose the sofa, not the chair Sierra had sat in last time. He leaned forward with his elbows on his knees and looked at the floor. He said things were complicated, that Sierra hadn't meant for it to go the way it did, that she was only trying to help her family, that he had been surprised when I called the police. I told him I had been surprised I needed to. He asked if there was any way forward from here. I asked him why he had stayed silent at the dinner table. He said he hadn't wanted to make things worse. I told him that his silence had made things worse, just not for Sierra. He had no answer for that. Just the same drop in his shoulders I remembered from when he was a boy who had forgotten something important and didn't know how to say so, except he was not a boy anymore. And this particular silence had been a decision, not an accident. I didn't raise my voice. I pointed toward the lake where the afternoon light was spreading slowly across the water. "I built this without any help," I said. "I spent my whole life giving. You never once asked what I wanted." He sat for a few more minutes, then he left. No embrace, no promise to call. He walked back to his car and drove out of the driveway, and I watched the dust settle behind him. 3 days later, a woman named Na-En sent a booking request. She was 66, recently widowed. She said it would be her first trip alone since losing her husband. She wasn't looking for activities or scenery, only stillness, and a space with no expectations placed on her. I accepted immediately. She arrived on a Thursday with one suitcase and a bag of books. Quiet in movement, careful in speech. The second morning, I found her on the back porch just after dawn. A mug of chamomile already steeping in both hands. I made my own tea and sat nearby, and we let the silence run for a while before either of us said anything. "Your home has a kindness in it," she said eventually, looking out toward the water. I didn't respond right away. I let the words find their place. "I'm glad you feel that," I said. She left after 2 days, the blankets folded neatly at the foot of the bed, a single sunflower standing in a water glass on the nightstand. No note, just the flower. I went to the dock after she left and sat with the boards pressing into the backs of my legs and thought about all the years I had kept quiet in rooms to spare other people from discomfort. How much of myself I had offered up to keep the peace in spaces that never quite became my own. That night, I added one line to the listing. "This house is a place of rest. Please enter with that understanding." Sierra posted again 2 nights later. A neighbor forwarded it. She was angrier this time and less careful with her words. She wrote that I was renting to strangers for money while refusing my own family entry. She wrote that my son was supposed to inherit this house someday. There it was, plain as anything. The assumption that had been there from the beginning, never spoken until now. I didn't respond. I didn't call Evan. I didn't write a single word in my defense. But Marlene did. Underneath the post, in the same unhurried tone as before, "The house belongs to her. She bought it and she takes care of it, and it looks to me like she's finally choosing peace over guilt. Good for her." No argument followed. By morning, Sierra's account had gone dark. Evan didn't come back. Whatever he had been working toward, whatever conversation he had been building in his head, he let it collapse quietly. I sent him a birthday card anyway, my name only in the handwriting I had used on every permission slip and lunchbox note and apartment lease of his life. A couple wrote to me that same week. They were in their early 40s. They said they had been watching the listing for some time and had never quite worked up the courage to reach out. They weren't looking for a celebration. They wanted to say their vows privately, just the two of them, somewhere quiet and full of light. They arrived with 2 small bags and a bundle of fresh lilacs wrapped in brown paper. They left a note on the kitchen table before they checked out. "Thank you for giving us a place where we could think clearly." I kept the lilacs in the vase. I watered them every morning until they dried at the corners and curled inward. Still holding their color, the house stayed quiet between guests. The lake shifted with the season. By early September, the light moved differently across the water, less bright and scattered, more purposeful. I watched a heron land near the reeds one morning and stand absolutely still for a long time. I matched it without thinking, the two of us motionless in our separate stillnesses. Some guests left small things behind. A poem folded into thirds and tucked beneath the bedside lamp. A hand-stitched coaster, initials worked into the corner by a woman who hadn't touched needlework in 20 years. A gardenia on the pillow, still damp from the morning air. None of them asked about the empty spaces on the hallway wall where photographs used to hang, or about the second lock on the inside of the front door. They didn't need to. The house answered those questions on its own. I never said Sierra's name again after that fall. Not from bitterness, from clarity. She had taken enough from me over the years without being asked. She wasn't getting my voice too. I tended to the rhythms of the place. I made soups. I walked the edge of the lake in the mornings when my knees were willing. I read for hours without looking at a clock. One evening, I went to the small shed and found a piece of flat wood, sanded it smooth, and painted it a soft shade of gray. The next morning, I nailed it beside the front door. It said only this: private. By invitation only. I stepped back, wiped my hands on my work pants, let the quiet come in around me the way it always did now, unhurried, undemanding, mine.